Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. Today we are talking about our roots. You hear us talk about or use the term roots, and so we wanted to explain what the roots of MWEG were and who they were essentially. And so we have actually recorded all of them a little bit earlier, so I'm going to share that with all of you. And then we have time for a Q&A after. So hold on one second.
So just to start us off, I'm going to read a little intro about roots. So MWEG founders envisioned the organization like a tree, with roots, a trunk, and branches. Roots are an anchor, providing stability for trees. They also nourish the tree and help it maintain its health as it grows. The MWEG roots are faithful, nonpartisan, peaceful, and proactive. Like tree roots, these principles are an anchor and provide stability for MWEG. They nourish the organization and help it maintain its health through challenges and growth. The Roots Director's job is to ensure that MWEG remains true to its roots. They each have a specific root area, but work together to support each other. With other MWEG leaders and volunteers, the Roots provide thought leadership, read and edit op-eds, internet posts, and other projects, and analyze organizations we might partner with, always keeping the root attributes in mind. So with that, we'll have each of our roots introduce themselves.
I am Anita Wells, and I am the faithful root.
My name is Megan Woods. I am the nonpartisan root director.
I'm Sarah Perkins. I'm the peaceful root director.
And I'm Liz Vanderwerken, and I'm the proactive root director.
Okay, thank you so much, you guys. So I'm just going to read off some questions, and we'll go through each of our roots and have them answer each of those. So first, we just wanted to start off with how does MWEG define your root?
So I'll start. Just as the first principle of the gospel is faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, the faithful root aspect of MWEG is foundational to our organization. Roots connect, ground, and share memories to better foster the growth of trees. So our MWEG community is unified by our shared belief in the restored gospel and in being members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, all are welcome, and we are women with a range of faith experiences and affiliations.
Right, nonpartisan, MWEG is a nonpartisan organization. We will not endorse candidates or party platforms or work to advance party interests. We're not defined by party labels, but we are defined by our common commitment to ethical government.
So for peacemaking, we strive as an organization to follow the 6 principles of nonviolence that were laid out by Martin Luther King and Gandhi and other philosophers. But generally, I think as an organization, MWEG is deeply committed to proactive and courageous peacemaking, as opposed to peacekeeping, as a tool of seeking out and establishing a more just and civil society.
And then the proactive route, I mean, Sarah kind of alluded to this a little bit in her answer, but a lot of our work at MWEG, we are interested in just kind of not reacting in the moment to things, but as an organization being strategic in how we approach issues, as well as helping our members to become proactive in their own kind of political involvement, being engaged and not waiting for things to happen for us to like respond. So those are just a few things with the proactive attribute.
Great, and just wanting to give you guys a chance to maybe expand on each of those as well.
Okay, so our purpose in coming together as LDS women is to help create a more just and ethical world. Ultimately, this comes down to our belief that we are all children of God and we have a stewardship over this earth and will be accountable for our actions and relationships. So we're trying to help build this beloved community, which will become Zion as we help prepare the world for Christ's eventual return, but making it a better place in the meantime. So we have faith in God and the gospel and hope in these beliefs and others, and in others, not just in other beliefs, but in other people. and charity for ourselves and all people as we strive to become these peaceful followers of Christ.
Yeah, so a big part of being nonpartisan is about basing our opinions on facts and on truth. We at MWEG have a great media literacy program, and this is the purpose of that is to help our members find truth and discern between, extreme bias and actual fact. So then we can base our positions on research and facts and support principled legislation, regardless of the party of its origin.
Yeah, I think I feel like a lot of women, I just feel like disagreement and discord is a really common experience that's not going anywhere that everybody will experience over the course of their lives. And so organizationally, I think we've recognized the need for teaching peacemaking skills as like just a moral good, but also as a necessary tool in your toolkit to like manage your life effectively. Particularly when it comes to political engagement. That's a really important tool for sisters in our community, for women in our community, at church, at home, in political engagement. And so that's something that we've really tried to develop.
So with the proactive route, one of the ways that MWEG as an organization has tried to be proactive in its advocacy is by identifying kind of some specific advocacy areas that we focus on. And so as the proactive route, I work closely with the advocacy team in, all of the route directors, just in providing thought leadership. But that allows us to kind of be more precise and focused in our response as an organization rather than it allows us to kind of use our energy in direct and specific ways. So those areas of advocacy are caring for creation, advocating for children and families, protecting democracy, and compassionate immigration reform.
Great. Is there any common misconceptions that you guys hear about your route, things that you do or don't do in that particular route?
Well, for me, it starts with the name. So MWEG was founded when the word Mormon was still used, and we've discussed changing that name to reflect President Nelson's injunction, but it's hard to find another one-word adjective that encapsulates the shared faith and community nature of Latter-day Saint women. But I think this is actually tricky on both sides. You have some super faithful people who find it a little bit complicated that we use the word Mormon, and then you find some people who are non-members or less active who don't really want to be affiliated with that name. So for me, that's one of the most complex things. But when you come back to it, that is our shared identity. And in many ways, having that separate name and word indicates that we're not part of the official church structure and organization, and we don't speak for the church or its leaders, but we also don't criticize the church or its policies. So faith grounds and inspires us, yet we're trying not to weaponize it. And it's actually problematic to use the name of Christ when engaging in politics. So that's the tricky thing we're trying to balance here.
So a common misconception for nonpartisan is that it means that we are neutral or centrist on all issues, and it doesn't mean that at all. We don't immediately accept or reject any position just because of where it originated from. And we definitely take firm positions on certain issues, and when we can find we find we can have an influential and persuasive voice in that area. Another common misconception that I find is that when we have members who believe a certain way, if we present a different point of view, they think we're being partisan. And so just learning to listen to each other is a huge part of being nonpartisan. And just because somebody has a different point of view doesn't automatically make us, a partisan organization.
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier. I think often peacemaking is confused with peacekeeping. I would say peacekeeping is conflict elimination, where you're like burying the conflict and hiding it and trying to like either hide your perspective or silence other perspectives so that there is no conflict present. But of course, the conflict still exists, right? There's still differences that exist. And so peacemaking, I think, is a way of conflict mitigation and conflict control, where you recognize the conflict and you face it courageously and honestly with a complete honesty about your perspective and a curiosity for other people's perspectives. And balancing that is really tricky and really uncomfortable. And so I think just recognizing how uncomfortable peacemaking is versus like the sort of comfort that peacekeeping, I think, often seeks to establish is a really important difference that we're trying to clarify as an organization.
With the proactive route, I would say one of the common misconceptions, or maybe just things that our members may be unaware of. So obviously we use these root attributes to kind of define how we operate as an organization, but particularly with the proactive route, we also want that to kind of be a pillar for how our members choose to engage politically. So many of you are familiar with the calls to action that MWEG issues, and we spend a lot of time developing those. And particularly this year, we have been focusing on ways to give our members like concrete things to be able to do, as that helps us to feel empowered and like we have direction. But I think beyond that, we want to remind our members that you also don't have to wait for MWEG to speak up about something. Due to the limited capacity of our organization, we're obviously going to make certain decisions about how and what we engage with at the federal level of government or within state legislatures. But we hope that the tools and skills that you've learned through MWEG empower you to be kind of agents of change in your own political sphere, whether that's writing to your legislators about an issue, using the peacemaking skills you've learned through MWEG, but to elaborate on a policy that maybe doesn't either align with MWEG's mission or is just outside of the scope of our advocacy work. And so we hope that that proactivity can inform your own political motivation and how you choose to engage. And obviously, we want you to continue to engage with MWEG's calls to action and opportunities for advocacy, but we don't want you to only restrict your political participation to that.
Thanks so much, you guys. The next thing I kind of wanted to touch on was MWEG's unique. It's a really unique organization that we have, and just what you feel like your root contributes to that uniqueness.
Well, in the political sphere, it is unique to be a group of women of faith who are civically engaged in this way. So what I think is particularly unique about us is we pray before our meetings begin and over our efforts, and we're trying to follow the Savior's way in what we do to become more like him. And one vital aspect of that is our Sabbath devotionals. So we take turns writing those, and I coordinate that. And I hear a lot of feedback from our members about how those are just such a weekly inspiration.
So our nonpartisanship allows us to focus on ethical government and principles and bigger issues rather than just responding to hot button topics of the day. And this coincides with the proactive route a lot, that we, Liz was saying we can't respond to everything, but nor do we need to, and we don't have to always be reactive. And basing it in nonpartisanship allows us to really look beyond the current news cycle and to the future and to what we want our country to be.
I think as an organization, engaging in political advocacy with a peacemaking mindset allows for like a larger vista, right? We're not trying to issue sound bites that are going to be really divisive, but like definitely make it into the news or whatever. But we're really trying to engage politically in a way that is a means of pursuing like real positive peace and justice for a wider range of people. And so that necessarily changes like the rhetoric that we use and the means of dialoguing and engaging these advocacy areas that we care a lot about and that we're deeply engaged in. Because we're playing a longer game, right? Like we're not just trying to win a debate or something. We're trying to actually create a more just and peaceable society.
For the proactive route, I would say one of the things that's been really important to our advocacy work, and particularly kind of where we had this kind of change of pace in the rapidity with which we are needing to respond to certain threats against ethical government. In the past, we've outlined our principles of ethical government. And so these are things that we just kind of outline how or why MWEG might choose to engage. So these principles talk about the rule of law and the roles and responsibilities of government and the different branches of government, the rights of each human, and so all of these principles of ethical government, we've spent a lot of time developing these out and kind of elaborating on why these principles are important. And so then when we have a specific advocacy issue or a bill in a state legislative session that comes up where we have membership presence, we have concerns about, we can simply refer to these standards that we've set for ourselves as an organization and how we choose to engage. And we have a very strong basis for that engagement and why we may advocate for a particular position or action, or even if MWEG may not necessarily advocate for a particular position, but just encourage our members to speak up and share their concerns about something, recognizing there could be a number of different opinions, but there may be this shared basis in these principles.
Great. So Liz kind of touched on this, but I'm hoping to get maybe expand a little bit for each of you on how your root impacts MWEG's advocacy work.
For me, I think it just grounds it all. I particularly love this one scripture. I have it framed on my wall, and it's in my Sabbath devotional this week. In the DNC 123:17, it says, "Therefore, dearly beloved sisters, let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power, and then we may stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God and for his arm to be revealed." So the fact that our efforts are all that we can do, and then we rely on God to make the difference.
So for nonpartisan, it is kind of counterintuitive, but it has enabled MWEG as an organization to be more powerfully persuasive, that we are seen by legislators and other organizations as nonpartisan. It gives us a seat at the table. It allows us to partner with other organizations that normally, if we were more partisan, they wouldn't be able to partner with us. And so we, as others will undoubtedly talk about, we focus more on how government functions, those principles of ethical government Liz was talking about, checks and balances and ethics, so we can respond to elected officials from either party when they cross lines of ethics or push too far in their against the checks and balances that we support.
Yeah, similarly, I think I've noticed this tendency in a lot of advocacy organizations and advocacy work of performing what I'll call like ideological purity policing, where it's like, in order to really advocate for this, you also have to believe this and this and this. And that like really severely limits actually the number of people who are able or willing to engage in your advocacy work and this issue that you presumably care a lot about, And I think what we're actively pursuing as an organization is building these broad coalitions with women who have come from a diverse variety of backgrounds and perspectives, and helping them using that diversity to help us achieve something a lot more lasting. That's not just going to be overturned when a new party or power takes hold. In order to do that, like that requires a lot of robust peacemaking skills to manage those differences effectively. I've described it to my child before. I've described differences as like fire, where there's a lot of energy in differences, and those differences can become really destructive and dangerous, but they can also be harnessed towards doing something really powerful. And I think that's what we're aiming for with our peacemaking skills, is to harness the wide variety of differences of perspectives and backgrounds and opinions and ideas that are present in our membership, and using them to accomplish a legislative victory or an advocacy effort that is important and powerful and I think lasting.
Yeah, I feel like my answer, I feel like kind of builds on some of the things Sarah was talking about. So I loved that kind of explanation of ideological purity policing. I think that really ties a lot to how MWEG has tried to structure our advocacy, recognizing many of the things that we have members from across the political spectrum. And as a nonpartisan organization, we love that and want to encourage kind of that diversity of thought within the organization. And so with our areas of advocacy, we've structured these to kind of reflect where we have a lot of broad things in common and can draw ideas from different parts of the political spectrum for different types of policy solutions that may appeal to different types of people. And so with the principles of ethical government that I mentioned before, that also helps us be strategic and focused rather than scrambling to have to decide like, oh, what does MWEG think about this issue? We have a really clear set of guidelines that we can evaluate things by, and we can recognize when there's a clear violation of one of those principles. So I think because of that, we've tried to structure the way that we do our advocacy work in ways that allow MWEG to be really effective as an organization, as well as to recognize that as our members have limited time with which to respond to things happening in the world. And so we want your time to be effective, used effectively as well. And so, yeah, I feel like the proactive route is really important in how we go about thinking through that work as well as making it happen.
Great. Just a couple more questions for you guys. If you guys could tell for those watching for our audience how your attribute helps MWEG to create community.
Well, I think LDS women are good with sisterhood. So that shared belief is a real strength for us. And we're just trying to make the world a better place together as we walk each other home. I love this verse I came across this morning in Mosiah. When King Mosiah is changing the monarchy to a reign of judges, just kind of encapsulated all this. He said in Mosiah 29:10, and now let us be wise and look forward to these things and do that which will make for the peace of his people. I just love that, you know, undergirding the government plans to have that as our guidepost there.
So in MWEG, I've been a member of MWEG for 8 years. And during that time, I've learned a lot of skills that, you know, the peacemaking skills and all the skills we're talking about. But I've also found a community that I can belong to. And the great thing that I love is that my personal friendships in MWEG, they are diverse. Like these women have very different ideas. And we've talked about, you know, what did you call it? The perspective policing of, you know, your friendships. That's what we sometimes do naturally. MWEG has this diverse but inclusive group of members, and we don't want people to leave feeling like they don't have a place here, because they do. And the more we learn the skills of civic dialogue, especially in peacemaking, we can learn together, we can understand each other, and this has been just a huge benefit for me personally.
That was a perfect intro for what I was going to say, Meg. Thank you. Yeah, so I think, well, I think it's really important to underscore how different peacemaking is from peacekeeping. I think it's also equally important to underscore how important civility and civic dialogue is in any peacemaking effort. We have, as an organization, we have civility guidelines for like our discussion spaces and for our work. And those are really important in enabling like any kind of dialogue across difference to happen, right? Because without a really, really high value for civility and for civic engagement, what ends up happening is just the loudest voices dominate every discussion. And everybody else will either begin self-censoring or being quiet or engaging really explosively. And then the conversation is just gone. And so I think fostering those skills for civility, for curiosity, for listening, for peaceable discussion is really, really important in fostering this robust community of difference and shared engagement and shared advocacy work across differences that is incredibly rich, but also precious and delicate and takes generosity to continue.
Yeah, I love the answers from my fellow route directors on this. I think the proactive route, it may be like a little less clear how this contributes to creating community, but I think it's kind of through these other route attributes that we kind of take a proactive position of like building a space. At MWEG, with like MWEG leadership, we talk a lot about how MWEG is a very big tent. So we kind of mean that, and like we attract members and women from across the political spectrum who have different views, and that's something we celebrate. And so we want to recognize and thank everyone who's a member for participating, for sharing your point of view, and helping us kind of use this community space, the community spaces of MWEG, to like refine the ways that we engage in political discourse and with these measures of civility. I know there's a lot, we're seeing it in our discussion spaces. There's a lot of like anger and hurt and overwhelm happening right now. But I think that underscores how just critical it is that we work to build community and not distance ourselves from people who are different from us. There's someone I follow, she's like a political activist, and shortly after the election, she posted something about building bridges and her commitment to building bridges and welcoming people, even if they think differently from her. And so I really loved that, the optimism with which she wanted to engage her following and people with different views towards like a committed and shared purpose. So I think the proactive route is one of the most important ways that we can do that in our own community spaces.
Great. So just for my last question, I'm just curious if you guys have any examples or stories about how your specific route has empowered or affected individual members.
Well, I just had a member tell me last week that, you know, she was so despairing of the news when she woke up on Sunday morning. She didn't think she could go to church and worship with her fellow saints because she knew she believed differently politically from them. But then she clicked on the Sabbath devotional that morning and it made all the difference. And it's the first thing she read instead of her news, and it made it possible for her to go to church. So that's just a small little thing, but I feel like we're carrying forward this legacy of, you know, powerful, faithful women. We have a lot of history, you know, activists who made a difference, creating church auxiliary organizations and suffragettes who made it possible for us to vote, and humanitarians who've relieved suffering all around the world. So we're part of that heritage and legacy, and I hope we can provide community and examples and hope for each MWEG member going forward.
So part of MWEG's mission includes creating principled citizens, and that's really the nonpartisan empowerment that we give to our members or try to share with them. And there are a lot of, we have principled voter series, and these help individuals in and out of MWEG, since we share a lot of those things publicly. And I've had people reach out to me, and you know, it's opened up their minds to voting differently than along party lines and considering being more thoughtful in the way they approach their own vote. And the other part is, and Anita talked about this too, is just the empowerment to stay in community with people who think differently. And we learn that at MWEG, and we practice it in our real lives. Not that MWEG isn't real.
Yeah, I think I've heard from a lot of women talking about how, like I said, I think, and like Liz has referred to, just there's so much division and discord and polarization right now that people are experiencing in church spaces and family spaces and political spaces. And it can feel really hopeless and overwhelming. And I think helping women feel like they're equipped with some peacemaking skills, with some skills towards being able to engage in a civil dialogue with other people has been really, really helpful in navigating some of these relationships that are important and deep and profound and that matter a lot, but that also can be really painful when we're faced with these profound differences. I also really have just loved the sixth principle of peacemaking in MWEG, which is peacemaking believes that ultimate peace is not only possible, but sure. I think there are times when that feels really like pie in the sky thinking or just unlikely, but I do believe that. I believe that's the promise of Jesus Christ, that peacemakers and the meek are the people who are going to inherit the earth. And I think as much as we can spread that message as an organization, that's actually really helpful for women who feel just overwhelmed by the differences and discords in our communities, that peace is coming, peace is inevitable. that is how this whole story wraps up, is in peace.
I think one of the ways that the proactive route that I've seen kind of the impact it can have on individual members is related to like our advocacy work and reaching out to your elected officials. So previously, prior to my work as the proactive route, I helped organize some of the legislative advocacy in Utah when I lived there for MWEG, and we had a lot of instances where we would meet with some of the elected officials in the state legislature and bring women who were constituents in their districts. And we saw a lot of really positive engagement from that, and just the way that women were connecting with their elected officials was really making a difference in how they could advocate for themselves and for their families and things that were happening in their communities. And so I think that's one of my favorite things about MWEG, is just the way that we talk about these like big ideals and principles, but at the end of the day, they become applied in very like concrete and tangible ways within our members' lives and spheres of influence. And I think that's really powerful and significant.
Okay, so if you missed the beginning part of this grow, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that this will be available in MWEG Central, and it's definitely will be a link that you can share if you have friends that are interested about MWEG and are unsure about what MWEG is all about. We will share this grow, but if you have any other questions, we have Megan Woods is here with us, and we have Sarah Perkins with us to answer any questions about the roots and how they operate. If it wasn't clear to you, you are totally welcome to come off camera and turn on your microphone and ask your questions.
Okay, so there's a question in the chat directed to me. Yeah, there are people who question our nonpartisanship because of our response to the person in power, or our non-response to them. Either way, we have people who think we are far too conservative, and people who think we are just definitely very left-leaning or liberal. So, but in answer to your question, yeah, that is, and people have different ideas of what is unethical, and we have taken positions about what we think is unethical, and it will offend somebody who supports that person or that party.
Do we have any other questions? Well, I don't see any more in the chat, and I don't see any other brave souls that want to come off camera and ask questions. So again, this recording will be available. So if you do want to know more, or you want to go back and listen and hear more about each of these different areas, I put in the chat. So if you're unaware, of someone asked, who are these ladies? These are our root directors over our faithful, peaceful, nonpartisan, and proactive areas of MWEG. So you hear us use those 4 core attributes often. And so this is kind of a checks and balances to make sure that we are holding true to those values. So thank you for everybody that came to the grow today. We invite you to come back next week. We have